What I have today is something that I truly didn't think would be as terrible as it ended up being, and so I thought I'd share this quick experience with you all today. Behold, the Cybertron PC. So this was a Craigslist find for about 50 bucks, this little Cybertron PC pre-built thing, I think it is. And yeah, the case is about the best part about this machine, perhaps maybe even the power supply, because everything else about this machine that I can honestly think of is really low end and probably going to be recycled or repurposed or something of that nature. It's not really designed to be a gaming PC, although I bet you the sucker who probably bought this thing before I picked it up ended up thinking it was because of probably how it was marketed on Amazon or some other marketplace, unfortunately. What lingers inside this machine is nothing short of disappointment, and I didn't think it was going to hold nearly as bad of hardware as what ended up being inside. Feast your eyes on the tiny AMD heatsink that covers an AMD A6 7400K APU, which is a supposed dual-core chip, although it registers in Windows as a single-core, two-thread chip, amazingly enough, and 16 gigabytes of DDR3 1600 MHz memory, along with the GPU being a GeForce GT 710, because of course every good gaming PC has to have one of those, am I right? It also has a 1 terabyte spinner hard drive and about a 500 watt power supply, 80 bronze rated apparently, and an AMD A68 motherboard made by MSI. So all in all, I mean, it's an okay office machine, if you will, but that's about all that I can see really being good for it as far as, well, overclocking, web browsing, and other sort of factors. I guess that's to be expected stuff. I mean, this thing does overclock reasonably well with a stock cooler, but don't get your hopes up. The temperatures aren't amazing. It does get close to its thermal limits. But on top of that, I just decided, you know what, I'm going to try some games out on this thing and see just how it does with the CPU overclocked to 4.2 gigahertz from the base 3.5 and its theoretical boost of about 3.8. Spoiler alert, it's pretty terrible. Now I'm going to start off with GTA 5 because it's truly awful. I didn't even get benchmark results for it because, as you'll soon see, it's completely unplayable. The next game I tested was Golf with Your Friends. This time I used the medium preset with no anti-aliasing at 1366 by 768 resolution. Since I didn't want it to become completely GPU bound, it actually seemed to be trading blows with the CPU, but again we were still CPU bound. Amazingly here, we were actually hitting 83 FPS on average with this map, however, it was stuttering. In fact, actually towards the end of the map, there's a huge stutter that lasts about a few seconds, and I don't know if that's because of my overclock or if that's just because the game is that taxing on the CPU. Really don't know for sure. Either way, it's playable, and it doesn't really micro-stutter all that much. It's just the random behavior of when it's going to do that massive stutter that I explained, and so on and so forth, because it does happen. It's not frequent, but it does happen. I really don't know, but I guess this is playable. I don't know, it's purely up to you. Alright, so after that monstrosity was done, I decided to test Left 4 Dead 2 at 1080p with the highest quality settings that I could set, with the exception of the anti-aliasing, and spoiler alert, we were CPU bound here, and pretty badly at that. There was micro-stuttering going on all over the place, and it didn't even average 30 FPS, so I really only did the first level because it wasn't worth doing much more. And no, we were not GPU bound. We were CPU bound the entire time, so pretty much me downing any of the quality settings to try to maximize the amount of frame rate. Was not happening. Even with a GT 710, can you believe it? So I didn't do too much more there. After that, I tried the opening level to Portal 2 at 1080p with the very high textures, and I think everything else set to high as well, and no anti-aliasing set. I think I set anisotropic filtering down to 8x, and even still, we were hitting only 30 FPS on average, and it really wasn't that great either. It was definitely jumpy, didn't very well feel smooth with the inputs, it felt slow. So I'll tell you what, this really shockingly is so bad that it just didn't really sit well with me. Like, Portal 2 is not that hard of a game to run. Even a Pentium 4 can do that. And then there's this thing here, which is just struggling. I don't know, again, if that's got anything to do with my overclock that's causing things to go wrong here. I doubt it, because normally Portal 2 runs way better than this. So they must have updated something recently to combat something. I honestly really don't know. And it was after this that I just stopped and I pulled the plug, because I was like, there's no way that any sane person would ever want to use this for games. Not even older games, to an extent, would probably run very well on this thing. It's just so held up by the processor that it just doesn't seem reasonable to want to use it for anything more than like web browsing and like office applications and so on and so forth. And it's a real shame, because this is an overclockable processor, which you would think would have a lot more capability, but this one very well doesn't. And so I'm just left with a bunch of disappointment. Now, I mean, I could always go back and I could revisit this machine in the future, perhaps with different hardware, perhaps a different CPU or graphics card or whatever, but I think as it stands today, it's just, I don't know, it's unfortunately something that just made me want to pull out the little amount of hair that I had using it. It wasn't necessarily bad with daily use sorts of things. It was just when it came down to gaming and so on and so forth, it was just terrible. So I'm going to wrap it up there. I'm not rambling any farther on this machine. Just, gosh, if you have something with an A6 7400K and you want to play games on it, please don't, and reduce your suffering, because, well and truly, the CPU in that chip is awful. But with that having been said, I'm going to get out of here. I wanted to keep this video somewhat quick today. If you like what you saw, click the thumbs up down below. Get subscribed and click the bell so you don't miss when I upload new videos. And I will hopefully catch you all in the next video. Thanks for watching.